feared her more than I feared anyone else.
It's a case that left the nation in shock and awe when Gypsy Rose Blanchard, once believed to be a paraplegic cancer patient, orchestrated the brutal murder of her mother and caregiver.
Who initially brought up killing your mother?
I did.
The case raised questions of morality and ethics when Gypsy alleged mental and physical abuse at the hands of her mother, who she said fabricated Gypsy's illnesses for years.
I always knew that I didn't need the wheelchair.
And how did you know that?
Because I could walk.
Almost a decade after the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard, her daughter is now set to be released from prison.
I think it's going to be a very difficult transition coming out into the real world and having to live life independently.
We're taking a look at the case so far and what's next for the high-profile defendant as she makes her way into life on the outside.
It's shocking for anyone. Honestly, the prison system is setting up a lot of people for failure. A majority of people end up just getting back into prison simply because they can't meet the criteria for parole. Right? They find it difficult to get a job. They find it difficult for housing. Family members, if any even exist, probably have ostracized them because of whatever the crime was. I mean, it's very difficult for these individuals to come out of incarceration and then find success. It's very, very rare.
According to forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre, the transition to life outside of prison is jarring for anyone, but maybe even more tricky for Gypsy. And in this case, I think another layer is added to it because it's a very well-known defendant in a high-profile case. Does that make things even more complicated?
It can. It depends on the high-profile nature. So some individuals can kind of coast on it, right? Maybe the crime is so salacious that, people just want to be in the arena, right, in the area of that person. But others, like this one, I think is going to be a very difficult transition coming out into the real world and having to live life independently.
The high-profile aspect of the case set aside, the details of Gypsy's story create another variable in her post-prison life and recovery.
What illnesses did you believe you had?
Cancer, muscular dystrophy. I needed glasses. I needed hearing aids, seizure disorder, and I can't remember what else.
And when did you figure out that you weren't actually sick?
I started to piece things together when I was about 19 years old. Then I didn't understand the full extent of how healthy I was until after I got arrested.
Gypsy's case put the terms Munchausen's and Munchausen's by proxy into the everyday zeitgeist when, after years of living with what she believed were real illnesses, Gypsy realized her mother created a wildly false narrative.
Munchausen's and Munchausen's by proxy are kind of antiquated names for what psychologists call a conversion disorder. Essentially, when we take Munchausen's, the person believes themselves to have some kind of illness. And so they'll do things to make themselves ill in a way to get attention or to get accolades or to get something, right? There's some external source. Munchausen's by proxy is when the individual puts that sickness, puts that illness on someone else. That's the by proxy part. So it's not Gypsy that has Munchausen's, it's her mother that has Munchausen's, right? That's the conversion disorder. And so when it's by proxy, though, the individual doesn't know any better. They don't know that they're not sick, or maybe as they grow up, they end up realizing that they're not. But the caregiver has purposefully done things to make them sick, has injured the person purposefully to make them sick in order to get the attention that they crave.
According to testimony from Gypsy herself, her mother, Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard, used medications to create symptoms in her daughter. Then she told others that Gypsy suffered from multiple illnesses, including cancer, muscular dystrophy, and paralysis. Dee Dee maintained Gypsy had the capacity of a 7-year-old and forced her daughter to use a wheelchair for more than a decade.
Why were you in a wheelchair in June of 2015?
Because my mother forced me to be in one.
Do you know why you were forced to be in a wheelchair?
No, sir, she just forced me to be in one.
And how long had you been in a wheelchair as of June of 2015?
Since probably I was about 8 years old.
Was there a time between when you first were put in a wheelchair and June of 2015 that you figured out that you really didn't need to be in a wheelchair?
Yes.
When was that?
I always knew that I didn't need the wheelchair
And how did you know that?
because I could walk.
Gypsy alleged her mother used these fake illnesses as a financial fraud scheme.
Did you and your mother obtain any kind of advantage by you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
What kind of advantage did you obtain?
Financial, attention, charity.
Financially mean money.
Yes, sir.
Did you obtain money as a result of you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
How did that work out? I asked you why you obtained an advantage for being in a wheelchair, and you said people gave you money. And then I think my next question is, why did they give you money?
Because they felt sorry for me. They believed the lie. They believed the fraud.
As Gypsy got older, she branched out, using online dating websites to connect with people virtually. That's where she met Nicholas Godejohn, the man who would go on to murder her mother.
How did you meet him?
On an online Christian dating website.
Do you remember the name of that site?
ChristianDatingForFree.com.
How old were you when you met Nick?
About 21.
In June of 2015, what did you consider your relationship to Nick to be? What kind of relationship?
We were boyfriend, girlfriend.
And when did you become boyfriend and girlfriend?
In October of 2012.
When did you first meet Nick in person?
March of 2015.
So between October of 2012 and March of 2015, you hadn't actually met Nick in person?
That is correct.
How did you, what type of relationship did you have during that period of time?
Online relationship.
And by online, what do you mean?
Strictly communicating through Facebook.
Any other ways other than Facebook?
Instant text messaging. Emails.
During Godejohn's 2017 trial, Gypsy told jurors the relationship was kept secret for fear of her controlling mother finding out.
Prior to March of 15, when you indicated you met Mr. Godejohn for the first time in person, had your mother met him?
No, sir.
Did she know he existed?
No, sir.
Why is it she didn't know?
Because it was a secret relationship and my mother would never allow me to have a boyfriend.
Why not?
Because she controlled every aspect of my life.
Did you and Nick ever talk about the fact that you were not allowed to date?
Yes.
How many times do you think?
I don't remember.
Did you and your mother ever have any discussions about whether you were ever going to be able to date?
Yes, sir.
Did you and Nick talk about that?
We may have.
What did your mother say about your ability to date going forward?
She said that it would never happen, that she would never allow it.
What about marriage? Did you and Nick ever talk about marriage?
Yes.
Did you and your mother ever discuss whether or not you'd be able to get married someday?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She said that she wouldn't allow it.
But when Dee Dee did find out about the relationship, she reacted harshly.
She took me back home. She smashed my computer and my cell phone. She chained me to a bed for 2 weeks.
As Gypsy testified, it was that kind of reaction that kept her from revealing the truth about her fake illnesses.
Why did you not tell doctors that you knew you could walk or you didn't believe yourself to be ill during the time that you were doing this?
I didn't think that anyone would believe me. I thought they would eventually tell my mom, and that would make my home life even worse for me. I feared her more than I feared anyone else.
Instead, she turned to a more drastic approach.
I was growing increasingly desperate to get out of my home life.
Did you tell Nick that?
Yes.
And what was your mom doing that caused you to be more desperate?
Things were getting physically and more physically abusive. The hitting was more. The starving was more.
Now, you mentioned you were in a wheelchair. Were you required to act any certain way when you were in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
How was that?
She would have me stay very quiet and pretend like I couldn't walk.
Who initially brought up killing your mother?
I did.
Why not just tell somebody rather than kill your mother? Why was that not an option?
I truly didn't believe that nobody would believe me if I told anyone. My mother had legal documents in place saying that I was incompetent, and I thought that meant that if I went to anyone, the police, or told anyone, she would just have them convinced that I was making everything up.
Who talked who into killing your mother?
I did. I talked him into it.
In June of 2015, Godejohn traveled from his home in Wisconsin to Blanchard's Springfield, Missouri home. He stabbed Dee Dee to death as Gypsy listened in from the bathroom.
You could hear your mom, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you heard her scream,
Yes, sir.
and she screamed your name?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you kill your mother?
I didn't believe I could do it.
Could you explain what you mean by that?
I don't like blood. I don't like the sight of blood. Frankly, I'm too squeamish, so I just honestly didn't believe I could do it on my own.
Days later, investigators tracked down both Gypsy and Godejohn to Wisconsin, where they were taken into custody. Godejohn was eventually tried and convicted of first-degree murder in 2018. This month, his defense team filed an appeal for a new trial, citing ineffective counsel during his first go-around. Right now, he's serving out his life in prison sentence without possibility of parole. Gypsy, though, took a plea deal, resulting in a 10-year sentence. This year, she was granted parole after serving 8 years. In some of the interviews I've seen from Gypsy since she's been arrested and now behind bars, she says that she feels more free in prison than she did the life prior to that, living with her mother. So how do you think she'll grow accustomed to a newfound freedom when she is released, life without her mother?
Freedom is a double-edged sword, right? Because it's a weird statement to say that she feels more freedom while in custody. But the reality is that that freedom that she's feeling is not being oppressed and not being abused by her mother. She's able to live the life that she wants to live under certain circumstances. Now you take those certain circumstances away, and now all you have is uncertainty. And someone who hasn't lived an independent life may find the idea of uncertainty very difficult to actually live with.
And you touched on independent life, which kind of brings me to my next question here. While she was incarcerated, Gypsy got married back in 2022. But based on her prior life as we know it in prison and before that, she's never really had a conventional romantic relationship in the way of going on dates or long-term dating, living with a significant other. So what would that drastic change be like? She won't be completely independent, likely living with her husband.
Yeah, it's hard to say because we don't really know the type of relationship that they actually have. Yes, they're married, but does she even know what marriage actually means? Does she have a marriage relationship or a marriage type relationship that any one of us would see as being conventional or even unconventional? Just anything that would make kind of logical sense in terms of intimacy. There's no guarantee that any of that is there, and just could actually be another source of exploitation, either from Gypsy or towards the husband.
But Gypsy will have more to overcome than just the memory of her mother's murder. Prison time set aside, the crime itself set aside of murder. How does someone like Gypsy recover from that, believing for many years that they are sick and then coming to the realization that they were healthy the entire time?
It's a hard thing because it boils down to the betrayal that they feel as a result of their primary caregiver, in this case, the mother. The primary caregiver doing these kinds of things intentionally to hurt her. It's going to take years upon years of working through all the different layers of betrayal, of love and hate, and all the different mixed emotions that you would have as a result of it being your mother, working through all of those kinds of things to actually learn how to trust again, which may not actually be possible. I mean, it can be, but for some people, it's going to be a real struggle.
How will she learn to trust people going forward now that she's being released?
I wouldn't be surprised if she ever did. Now, the other thing that we need to understand is that she also manipulated someone into engaging in a murder. So, but the idea that she's somehow this person who doesn't understand what's going on in the world is that's not true. She clearly does. She knows right from wrong. I think what we're really kind of focusing on though is the transition, because she had a villain in her life, in her mother, and she was able to kind of focus her energies and focus the skills that she did have into overcoming that villain. She doesn't have that anymore. Now she has to live her life totally and completely independently and free from, the abuses that she suffered from before. If she's not able to do that, she may find herself back in prison.
Gypsy has been outspoken since her arrest, giving multiple interviews from behind bars, including several that led to the book Released: Conversations on the Eve of Freedom. Delatorre says this will likely continue.
I think she has to. I think, and for her, I think the transition is going to require being in the media spotlight, because it's a behavior, it's a condition, it's a situation that she understands because of the notoriety of the case from so many years ago.
But it's real-world connections that will be Gypsy's ultimate test.
People want to connect to other people, right? Just generally, people want to make those kinds of connections. And I think we have to really caution ourselves into understanding what the level of betrayal she actually feels is, and how far does it extend. I mean, certainly it extends as far to her mother, but maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's just as trusting with other people, which is why she's able to get married, right? Maybe she is just as trusting as anybody else would be, and so in that case, she wouldn't find it all that difficult. I think this first couple of years, in particular this first year, if she's able to settle down, she's able to get a job, she's able to get her housing in order, she's able to kind of maybe live a life under the radar despite the media scrutiny that she's clearly going to have. If she's able to kind of live as normal of a life as possible for someone like her, I think she stands a real chance of actually building on that and maybe potentially being a productive member of society. If she's not able to do that, and we're going to see this in the first year, she's not able to do that, I think she's going to have a real difficult time and may find herself behind bars again.
Gypsy is set to be released from Missouri's Chillicothe Correctional Center on December 28th. We've reached out to her for comment about the transition to life outside of prison, but so far haven't heard back. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.